And good morning to everyone. Good turnout a couple of days after Christmas. It's good to see everybody. And it is, a couple of days after Christmas. I think yesterday was Kwanzaa, if I've got that right. So happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, and a belated happy Hanukkah as well. And I'm sure that there is probably an agnostic or atheist celebration going on somewhere in the world, as well as many other traditions. And I wanted to talk about that this morning is all these traditions that we come from. And what they mean and how to relate to them as practicing Zen Buddhists in America. Because, out of 321 million people in America, there are 2.75 million people who identify as Buddhists, and I do not know the subset of that are Zen Buddhists. But anyway, that puts Buddhism in general in America at 1%. So I did the math. That means, roughly speaking, there are 319 million people out there that have no idea what we're doing or why, or might have judgment about it or questions about it. And that came up earlier this week in some conversation with some of our members, and I thought it was worth pursuing. But first, I thought I'd share a personal story. Some of you may have heard this and some of you may not, but about 32 years ago, 5 months after Lori and I had first met, we got a couple of URL passes and made our way over from Seattle to London with a 30-day URL pass. No hotel reservations whatsoever. We didn't know each other all that well. And it was somewhat of a risky proposition that obviously has turned out okay. But as you know, in traveling with even somebody day after day for a month and no itinerary, it's like, where are we going to stop? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to eat? What are we going to see? What do you want to do? I'm tired. No, you're tired. No, we're both tired. Why did I come here with you? Every bit of possible experience in a relationship at that point. And one of the experiences happened at Assisi, and the mountain, where you go up, where Saint Francis did retreat in the caves, and I had a profound experience, a revelation, and most of you, I think, know of Saint Francis. Well, Lori and I, being Lori and Dan, of course, did not take a taxi up the hill, but decided to hike the 3 miles up the hill to the caves. And the entire way up, there were diesel Mercedes full of German tourists and buses full of Brits. And, it seemed like everybody was going in a cloud of exhaust up to the caves of St. Francis. And we were breathing that exhaust. And, I've been known to be, through the years, perhaps a cynical, skeptical person, and that applied to religion in many ways. And so we go up and we tour the caves, and it was like really crowded. No way you could do that in COVID days right now, just because narrow passageways and lots of people. And we came out and we're walking back down the mountain or hill to our pensione.
Yep.
Yeah, the pensione, the one we got locked out of for coming back too late with a bottle of wine. But
I thought that was Senegal.
well, maybe
That
that was a different evening. Anyway, so we're coming down from St. Francis, And I had injured my knee running. So you've got a picture of me limping down the mountain, only partially a metaphor, limping down the mountain. And Lori is there strong as ever with me. And I started complaining about all the tourists and like the commercialization of this and like, blah, 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 God, blah, 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 saints, blah, 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 Catholicism. My family's Irish, Italian, Catholic by background. And what ensued was a pretty serious argument between Lori and me as we're coming down the hill. I've since referred to this as our slinky moment. The slinky that expands and contracts, because here's how it went. Lori turns around and says to me, I can't believe that you don't believe in anything larger than yourself, that you think that you are in control of everyone. And I'm like, well, yeah. And so I'm limping, she's not. So I see Lori, she walks away, storms away down the mountain. And her shape, her size is getting smaller and smaller and smaller as she goes down the mountain, and I'm limping. And then all of a sudden I would see that little dot start getting bigger and bigger and bigger and coming back up. And then we'd meet again. And I don't think I can spend another day with someone that doesn't believe in God. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but like, I don't get it. Little black dot down the mountain. And so for 3 miles, it went like this, up and down the mountain. Here's Lori and Dan knowing each other for 5.5 months, having this argument about the existence of God and, the belief in self-control and control of your life and control of the world. And I think one of the Titan slinky moments was, where do you think that all of the great inspiration, the great discoveries, the great art, where do you think that comes from? Is that all you? I'm like, well, little dot going back down the mountain. And I tell this story because, it was a profound moment. And I did not on that hike profess fealty to God or that I would convert. But we did make it through that moment and continue on with the trip, and went and found my family village in Italy, and lots of wonderful things happened. But there you have that tension between belief and non-belief, between what it means to see the world in a certain way. And I know I've talked to you before about me coming into this practice thinking, I'm believing that everything in my head was true and I was self-made, and success is something that you do and you control everything. And the more you control it, the more successful you will be, right? And coming to the practice was a good, I don't know, 6-8 years after that moment. Yeah, something like that. So, there's a journey.
More than that.
There's a journey, more than that, Lori says it had to be. Yeah. So, what is it to be one of the, fraction of 1% of people practicing Zen Buddhism? What does that slinky look like? Now, most of you know, because we talk about it a lot, that, from my perspective, one of the beautiful outcomes of this practice is connection. Stepping out of that small self into the larger self, and being able to connect with others and love others and be loved by others across the perceived and real barriers that present themselves in our lives. But what does that mean? And how do we do that? How do we connect to traditions, that might be different than ours, religion that may be different than ours, How do we connect or reconnect to our family who may not understand what we're up to, or we may not understand what they're up to, or one of us may have voted for Trump and one of us may not have. You know, my brother is a Christian minister in Atlanta, Georgia. I think most of you know that. You know, how do you coming down the mountain from Assisi going, no, I'm the master of everything and there is no God. How do you connect with your brother? You know, how do we connect across borders? And that goes to that notion of the bigger self. Like, who are you? Andrea, you and I had a great talk about this earlier this week. Who are you? Does it stop at the skin, this bag of bones and flesh? Is it as far as we can touch, reach, or see, or love, or feel? You know, where do you begin and end? And if, as good Zen practitioners, we're expanding that big self outward, then guess what? That includes people with different traditions. It includes our family that we may or may not have moved away from. It includes other religions, no religion. It includes different political parties. So, you know, what are the hurdles in that connection? Well, there's the hurdles of our beliefs, or what I think in a social media post I called our pre-existing traditions, you know, a pun for the time, you know, rather than pre-existing conditions, our pre-existing traditions. Right? You know, what are our traditions? What do we believe? How do we see the world? And how is that in itself putting up a barrier between ourselves and others? And of course, Zazen helps to deal with that because we look at what's going on in our brain, in our thoughts, and are able, hopefully, to move beyond that self to some sense of self that is larger, and to start at least seeing our beliefs and our opinions, our thoughts, our emotions, start seeing them for what they are, and not necessarily as always being the truth, but, oh, there's an emotion, there's a thought, there's a belief, there's a bias. What do I do with that? So there's the hurdles of our own beliefs. And then there's, you know, the hurdles of the 319 million non-Buddhists out there. And how does that present itself? And when we lived in Brooklyn, we had a neighbor that lived upstairs, actually a woman I knew quite well because we had worked in different ad agencies together. And she was a devout Christian, the daughter of missionaries. And she just very simply and quite frankly confronted me with, how can you worship a false idol? You know, how can you worship a false idol? And so then that it requires us to be understanding our practice and looking at our practice. I mean, how do you answer that? Because how you answer that is crossing the divide. You know, how do you answer that from a place of love and spaciousness? And it might be no answer sometimes, but how do you answer that? Or my great aunt Pat, shortly before she passed away at 100 years old, where I was at her bedside, and she said, now I'm concerned about you. Tell me about this Buddhist thing. And so we had a conversation. You know, my great aunt Pat, what a lovely woman and great artist and just happy soul. But she was worried about my soul and needed to hear from me. What is this Buddhist thing? And so I, to the best of my ability, translated, you know, my practice in a way that she could hear it, and that still rang true for me. And you know, she reached out and held my hand and said, okay, then, thank you. Thank you for answering my question. And then when she passed away, 5 months later, something like that, about 5 months later, I was called upon to step in by her pastor, who, in the face of my family's complete dysfunction around how this funeral and ceremony was going to be, the pastor pulled me aside and said, "You got to help me here. You got to help me here." And then I had to help, not as the great nephew, but I had to help in a way that could bridge this divide between family desires and community desires. And in the end, I was asked to play a major speaking role at her funeral. And it was such a great opportunity because I told the story. I told the story of her asking me, "What about your soul? What about this Buddhist thing?" And so I was able, in front of her congregation, to make that connection and to tell the story of my great aunt, whose faith was so strong that she needed to know that I was going to be okay. Lori's mom, Thelma, had similar questions about our Buddhist practice for a while, at least, right?
She had questions about my soul.
She had questions about your soul. And then there was the woman, I did a memorial service in New Mexico, and the woman that was being memorialized was, she's from Northern California. She practiced through different streams of faith and spirituality. And to honor that, I did this memorial service side by side with this young Catholic priest. And it was really cool, because the Catholic priest led the group in meditation and I led them in prayer. But afterwards, the wife of one of Diane's brothers came up to me and got right in my face. It was like, "I want to know one thing. Do you believe that Jesus Christ died for our sins?" Now, I'm not a practicing Christian and pretty much grew up without Christianity and without my Catholicism, and went through many years of rejecting all of that. But through the practice of Zazen and this continued exploration with my brother, I actually was able to look at her and honestly go, yeah, I get that. And like, all the weapons went away. All the weapons went away. Now, I can't say that I fully understand my answer at that moment. But I can tell you it was not a dodge. It was an honest response and an honest reaction to what she was asking. And so, how do we do this? Then Zazen and getting things out of the way is a big part. The sitting and clearing out all those beliefs and positions and opinions and biases, so that we actually can be open, at least, to another point of view. Open to Lori's command or demand coming down Assisi is like, you have to be bigger than this, Dan. You cannot believe that you are it. That's not going to work. Zazen is wonderful. Zazen, Amber, is our meditation practice of sitting and with our breath and with different practices, but sitting and discovering what is deep within our true nature, we call it. Sweeping everything else out, the dust off the mirror, the rice out of the bowl. Many, many different metaphors. But what is left is space. And I think that's really cool, because in that empty space, anything can appear, creativity, discovery, joy, love, God. And so I was on the phone on Christmas Day with my brother saying, I had this conversation with one of our members this last week. And the question was, from a Pentecostal point of view, there's a real skepticism of meditation, at least as described to me. Okay, I'm not a religious expert or expert of religions, but as described to me, a real hesitation or concern about meditation. Why? I said, why? And this person said, well, because if you empty yourself of everything, the devil can rush in. And I was like, ooh, like that's a really different description of emptiness. Because Amber, we talk about when you sweep everything away, it creates vast emptiness. And emptiness is a funny word. People struggle with it. Well, if I'm empty, what does that mean? And even in Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, especially in the 60s and 70s, that was often interpreted in a nihilistic way. Like, well, everything is empty of meaning anyway, so I can just do whatever I want. If everything is empty, there, no need for morals or ethics. I know I can sleep around as much as I want or whatever, however that manifests itself. But we're not actually talking about a nihilistic emptiness. It's not the void. It's emptiness of attachment and meaning and delusion to all that other stuff. And so I was explaining this to my brother, and we've talked about this stuff a lot over the years. And he said, yeah. He said, I get what you're saying because I understand, and I've been through this with you enough, but you have to know about Jesus's parable of the empty house. And I go, well, what is Jesus's parable of the empty house? And the parable of the empty house essentially goes like this. I went and did my study. He told me, where Matthew 43, he said, go read your Bible. And, by the way, this is another way of like being a Buddhist in a 319 million non-Buddhist world is inquiry. Be curious. I'm like, okay, what's this parable of the empty house? And the parable of the empty house is that, step one essentially is rid yourself of evil spirit. Like, that's pretty consistent with, rid yourself of delusions through Zazen. But then it does say, if you don't then pour God back into that emptiness, that the devil will come back with 7 evil spirits in greater force than ever before. And my brother said, just know that you're going to walk into this buzzsaw. Just know that if you're talking to somebody coming out of the Christian Pentecostal faith, or somebody that knows their Bible or that has that view of the Bible, they're going to say, oh no, emptiness is a grave danger. And so what that says to me is that's the wrong word to use in that context. And this may not work for everybody, but it's like, yeah, I get that Jesus died for our sins. I've reached a point at least where if I'm talking to a room full of Christians, as I've done at my brother's church, I can say, look, before Zen Buddhism, before meditation, I rejected all of this. I rejected everything you guys are about. After practicing Zen Buddhism and emptying myself of prior beliefs and biases and delusions and opinions, I was able for the first time to see God. Now, you want to talk about connecting with a room full of believers. Now, what is God? God is whatever God is for the person uttering the word. Allah, God, Yahweh, emptiness, Dharma. What is that pure experience of our life that is awesome? It's a miracle. The next moment, the next hour, the next day, it's pretty miraculous. There's no guarantees. And so as we come out of the Christmas season in a society that is largely Judeo-Christian, and as you all come out of your family traditions, I just think it's really important to stay connected, to not disconnect, because sometimes people come to our practice as a reaction to where they've come from. And that's fine if that's the initial impetus. But keep cleaning that bowl, keep sitting zazen, keep letting go of attachments and destroying delusions, and then see what's there and see if there's a way to connect. I'm not saying you need to believe anything or disbelieve anything, but isn't our job as our biggest selves to be connected to all of it and to spread the love, the smile, the laugh, the joy? The parable of the empty house. Because when we're our true selves, when we really reach that point where the BS is gone, there are no boundaries, right? In the purest sense. And some of us have seen little glimmers of it. When there's that little glimmer, there are no boundaries, there are no divisions. It's all one big, beautiful, miraculous thing. And if that sounds like it's touching on Christian themes, so be it. It's a way to connect. It's a way to connect. So, family, community, neighbor, believer, non-believer, people you work with, people you differ with, open up. That's my big hope for all of us, is just that we're able to open up. Good?
Yeah.
Good? Yeah? Okay. I think I'll end there. We're at a pretty good time, and open it up for any questions or comments, any stories of Assisi you'd like to share. Art and Marsh, any arguments you've had over the existence of God. Anything going on out there, I'd love to hear from you. You can unmute yourselves as you know, and I cannot. So over to you guys. Jeff.
Hey, everybody. Happy holidays, you guys. Yeah, it was really, really interesting talk. I just really enjoy what you kind of brought to the table, and the story of you two. I could totally see you two fighting on the trail. I know I grew up in a Christian environment, and it was pretty relaxed Christianity. And then I went to college and studied Zen with a Jesuit priest. So he taught from both kind of perspectives. Zen to him was the deepest form of prayer, which is nonverbal, non-image prayer. According to the Catholics, there's like penitence for something that you want, or sorry, what is it? Penitent? I don't know. Whatever, something you want, something you're sorry for, gratitude, and non-image, nonverbal. So he kind of taught from that perspective. So I feel like I had kind of a bridge there between Christianity and Buddhism for myself, anyway. And then I sing Christmas carols every year at Christmas time with a company. We go out in quartets and sing, and it's probably my favorite job, because I love that music, and as a performer, it's an immediate connection with an audience, and the songs are beautiful and very often sacred. As you might imagine, this year, not as much gigs. I think. I mean, ordinarily I'm working anywhere from 1 to 4 hours a day singing, and at different places, parties and restaurants and such. But this year was not like that, and but we did have one really truly awe-inspiring gig, which was for this couple who they usually come and see us at the Tam O'Shanter, which is a restaurant in Los Feliz. We're not singing there this year, as you might imagine. So they hired us to come, and she has prostate cancer. And we knew that going in. And so maybe last Christmas, maybe not, hopefully not. But it was just, and they come specifically to see us to this restaurant. So it was us, the two of them and their three kids in their backyard, and us singing to them, trying not to cry the entire time, which was tough. But I can say, like, even so many of the songs, and for many years I wrestled with, man, I'm like singing all these songs about Jesus' birth, and I don't really know if I believe that, even though I'm like pro compassion and this message of Jesus, the whole, getting whatever, making the lame leap and the blind see and the resurrection. I'm not sure if I totally believe that. But at some point I realized it just doesn't matter. And certainly in this case, as we sang like "Oh Holy Night," which is a really, very kind of crucially Christian song. It just, I don't know how to express it in words, but you just felt this presence there with these people and this connection where we just, everybody let go, and there was just spirit present. And that was kind of the experience for a lot of the gig. So I just really appreciate the idea that God exists. I definitely believe that, and that we can experience God, and whatever it is that our definition of that is, or however we get there, is good. And I do feel like Buddhism is a very unique religion in the sense that there's no exclusivity, and there's no rejecting of whatever beliefs you had when you came here, so to speak. So that's kind of my Christmas story in relation to what you expressed.
Thanks, Jeff. Can you sing the first few bars of "Oh Holy Night"?
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the dawn of our dear Savior's birth. Something like
Amazing.
Hey, Galen, what did Buddha say on the day of his awakening?
Wonder of wonders. I, the great earth, and all sentient beings, attain to the wisdom and virtue of the Tathagata to thusness.
Yeah.
But because of our upside down ways of thinking, we fail to see it.
Kind of cool, huh?
That's great. Yeah.
And then he was looking at the morning star as he said that.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hair's breadth difference. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Galen.
Beautiful share, both of you.
I wonder if I can say something else.
Go for it.
I sang "Oh Holy Night," the first verse of it, for my sixth grade class Christmas program. It's a great song. It was my mother's favorite song. The St. Francis of Assisi was considered by Islamic mystics to be a Sufi. A lot of Christians don't know that, but he had made a lot of inroads during the Crusades with the other side, and did everything he could do to try to stop the war over there, which is just a way for me to get to talk about Sufis just for a minute. Jalaluddin Rumi, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, has a wonderful poem about a dialogue between God and Moses, because Moses comes across a shepherd who is praying and telling God, how he wants him to come down because he wants to comb the lice out of his hair and mend his sandals and wash his feet and all that. And Moses just goes off on him and says, that's ridiculous. God is not a person. It's not like talking to your uncle. You can't talk to God that way. God's much greater than you've ever imagined. And the shepherd, knowing who Moses was, says, pardon me, and just gets up and walks off into the desert. So Moses is walking along thinking kind of self-righteously that about how people believe in such primitive ways. And God comes to him and says, Moses, you've separated me from one of my faithful. Said, for years and years, I've been feeding that shepherd and taking care of him, and you've moved him apart from me. So Moses starts feeling bad, starts trying to find this shepherd, and runs out into the desert, chases him down eventually, and apologizes to him and says, I'm really sorry. God's come to me and told me that, that your method of worship is just as valid as mine. And the shepherd by then has had a realization and says, no, Moses, thanks a lot. I needed that jarring. I needed that wake-up call. But God comes back to Moses and says, look, Christians have their ways of doing this. Hindus have their ways of doing this. Dravidian Muslims have their ways. Some people worship fire. He said, all those manners of worship, they don't have anything to do with me. They don't glorify me, they glorify the worshiper. Said, I don't care how you do this. What I want is burning. I want an intensity of burning. I want you to be on fire with what you're doing. Make a commitment and go for it. Such a wonderful poem, for me, and it came to mind immediately when you started talking about this thing.
That's wonderful, Galen. If you could share the poem out, that would be fantastic. I don't know if it's in a form that's shareable, after. But yeah, or just
Geez,
point us to it.
What's it called again?
Well, I would just say read all of Rumi and you'll come across it.
Yeah.
I can't find it. I don't know.
There's an assignment.
Moses and the Shepherd, something like that. I don't know what the title is.
Okay. Thank you, Galen. Thank you very much.
Glorify the worship.
Anybody else? Amber, how are we doing? Sorry, you didn't know. I just call on people if I.
Oh no, I was actually looking for that poem, Moses and the Shepherd, and I found it, and I was going to give you guys the link in the chat.
Perfect.
Amazing.
No, I think this is absolutely stunning and beautiful. I'm already crying. So I don't know. I don't have anything to say, but that you touched my heart, and I think this is a beautiful practice.
Thank you, Amber, and it's great to have you with us. Thanks. Mark, haven't heard from you in a while, so I'm going to call on you.
It's actually funny that Galen should relate that story, because that's the exact story he told me when we were having a conversation about atheism. At one point when I first started with my practice, I was it literally made me physically cringe when somebody would talk about God, or, God bless you, or this, that, or the other thing. And one night at a late dinner, Galen related that story to me, and he told me, he's like, what does it hurt? Like what does it hurt to allow these people to care for you that way? You know, is it an insult when they say that they're going to pray for you, or is this like you know, it's a gift, right? And it's been a huge progression for me. I came up very, like, I was in a religious school, went to church every Wednesday, every Sunday, Bible study every single day, and at one point it was like, I'm done with this. You know, it's like everything that I was becoming through my teenage rebellion or whatever, and I'm being told constantly, like, you know, you're sinning, you're going to hell. And I was like, well, then why am I even going to bother with this? And then it's funny that I would have to, through Buddhism, find that connection back to appreciating somebody else's faith. You know, and it was kind of it was hard for me at first. I mean, even so that as I was starting this, there were people in my life that were almost offended by my practice, right? They're like, you're an atheist. What are you doing? Do you even understand what you're doing? Like, you're Buddhist now? Like, what the hell is all that about? And through like kind of the same process that I had of learning to connect with someone else's faith, even though I don't share that same faith, they've seen it, right? So from the outside, they see the changes that are taking place in my life. You know, they see that peace that comes with just sitting, you know, and being able to connect with life and to cease fighting.
Mm.
And that's like that's what I hear a lot in your talk today, was just cease fighting, right? Like, we don't need to argue over who's right about it, because we're all pretty much thinking the same thing. We just don't agree on the path to get there. So I appreciate you calling on me today, Dan. This was a good one for me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mark, and I'm sure everybody else is just as glad that I called on you. It's always a gamble, and you know, doing this talk, you know, which comes up every once in a while, at least once a year, is you know, somewhat fraught with peril, because you can send people running for the door. You know, the simple mention of the word God or religion, you know, can now, I don't, you know, I don't, the group on the screen right now is so solid and so big, but I mean, I don't know, maybe somebody's triggered. You know, it's a tricky thing to do. But and thanks so much, Mark. And part of it too, it occurred to me as you were speaking, is just how you label yourself. Because as Mark just put it, you know, it's really who you're being and how you're being in your life and in the world. Not what you call yourself. And a lot of this comes up with what do I call myself? What labels do I put on myself? Buddhist, non-Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, Christian, Muslim, Sufi, you know, Republican, Democrat, green, you know, because you start throwing the labels away, and it's a great exercise to do, is just start throwing away all of your labels and see what's left. We'll do that together. I think we did it a while back, but it's a great exercise. We'll do that together sometime, where you literally just start dropping every single label that you can come up with for yourself. It's profound. You know, including husband, father, man, Dan, you know, you just start dropping all of it. Buddhist, priest, teacher. And you know, do that. Keep going and see what's left. It's really a beautiful thing. Really fun. We'll do it together coming up. Tal, I know you come from a family of practice and faith and belief. How are you doing?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, being Jewish, and I think there's some other folks on the call as well, it has never been a conflict. We're not really religious, we're more cultural. I was born in Israel, so, very strong cultural tradition at home, but there's just never been a question for me from family or others about any incompatibility with the practice and Judaism. In fact, I think the Jubu, connection is really strong and sort of invited. So I don't, that's not much of a statement other than I think it's always been really, there's a whole tradition of spirituality and meditation in a lot of Jewish tradition, like Kabbalah. There's just always been part of a broader tradition. So I feel lucky that it's never come up or any sort of conflict. And if anything, it's just enhanced my connection to the cultural practice as well.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. I didn't know you were born in Israel. That's new information.
Yeah, hence the name.
Beautiful name.
It is.
I'll take you off the spot now.
Looks like,
Yeah,
Oh, go. Yes.
I was brought up Jewish. I had my bar mitzvah the same week that Israel became a nation in 1948. And I never consider myself a very religious Jew. The rest of my family always had to get on my case to make me do things. I remember when I was a kid, the rabbi who was giving me my lessons for bar mitzvah had to chase me on the ball field to get me to do this. But my mother was happy that I was bar mitzvah, and my grandmother and my great grandmother.
Fantastic. Well, you're obviously a better Zen student because I've never had to chase you across the field. Thanks, Art. Yeah, so, I mean, with all of this, and Tal spoke to it, look for ways that this practice connects you. If you find it disconnecting you or creating distance, take a hard look at that, because that may be your beliefs getting fixed or in the way. Because at its best, this should keep you really open, and able to connect across all of this. All right, Chalet, you're on.
I had a feeling you were going to do that. I guess what's kind of on my mind is kind of echoing what Mark said, and then what you followed up with, just this kind of stripping away of descriptives of how we describe ourselves or others, and just how at the root of it, I mean, these people who have faith and belief in things share all these commonalities. And, I think about the Pope. I mean, he's one of the most spiritually inspiring people I know, I mean, in our lifetime. And you just start stripping all of that away of Buddhism or Catholicism. And I just think there's so many beautiful similarities. That's what I kind of was thinking about. Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's all.
And with the name of Passini, I know you know.
Yeah.
Got some
Yeah.
Catholic in there, right? We've talked about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I went to private schools and was raised Catholic, and at a certain point had to go to mass every morning at 7 with my grandmother, which was a beautiful experience. I mean, it really was. It kind of shaped this idea of spirituality at a very young age, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you, Shirley. Lori always gets kind of, because she's not on the screen, she's here. Anything to add?
well, actually, when you were speaking, I was because I really like to define terms sometimes because we have sort of a contextual understanding of terms, and I feel like it's important to do that. Nihilism is one word that came up for me, and it says it's the belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. It's often associated with extreme pessimism and a radical skepticism that condemns existence. A true nihilist would believe in nothing, have no loyalties, and no purpose other than perhaps an impulse to destroy. It's taking it down a very deep hole there. But I mean, I lived through the 60s. I was a young adult during the 60s, and nihilism was sort of the far side, philosophically of belief systems. And then they had me thinking about, well, so is Buddhism is that a philosophy? And Buddhism is considered a philosophy, and which I think, of course, is a place of neutrality, a place of acceptance, and a place of seeing beyond beliefs of any nature that are that have boundaries. So I thought that was really helpful.
Yep. Sounds like I almost used the word correctly too. So that's good. The nothingness, right? We talk about emptiness and nothingness. I mean, just keep exploring that and questioning that, and certainly if you have questions, come to anybody here in the net or to me, because emptiness, nothingness, sometimes we say we have nothing to give because you have it all. It's not that belief system around nothing, I mean, it's certainly not that. And it's words sometimes falls short, but in that moment that you hold a baby, or really see the sunset, or pull the bow of a violin across the strings, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think you find the right communication in every situation if you just trust your inner understanding and your love of one another, and just your beliefs that we're here for good.
And be light about it. Some of you will remember Dexter Dwight, who joined us a while back. He was he's the lead percussionist for the Miami Symphony Orchestra. I just watched a little video, and like, here's the lead percussionist for the symphony, and he rolled out an anvil on a stump and put it right next to the conductor and played the anvil, with hammers.
It had two tones.
He had two tones because I think he had two hammers.
And they were playing a polka.
Yeah, and they were playing a polka. So, remember with your practice and your beliefs to play the anvil with hammers. Don't always be looking for the harp. All right.